TerraVision X. Think outside the box.
Alright, welcome. In this explainer, we're diving into some really fascinating and honestly pretty challenging historical theories. The big question is this: what if the very timeline we live by is hiding some incredible secrets? Let's get into it.
Okay, I want you to start by imagining something. You go to bed one night, it's Thursday, October 4th. You wake up the next morning, but it's not the 5th. It's Friday, October 15th. 10 whole days have just vanished.
Now, this isn't some kind of science fiction plot. This is exactly what happened back in 1582. Pope Gregory XIII issued a decree, and poof, 10 days were just erased from the calendar. People literally went to sleep on October 4th and woke up on October 15th.
So what was the official reason? Well, on the surface, it was purely scientific. The Julian calendar, which everyone had been using for centuries, had a tiny little error. It was off by about 11 minutes a year. Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal, right? But over 1,600 years, that tiny drift really adds up, and it threw the seasons completely out of sync. This Gregorian reform was supposed to be a simple astronomical fix. But the source materials we're looking at today ask a really provocative question. What if that calendar change wasn't just a simple correction? What if it was actually a clue, a key that unlocks a much deeper, much more complicated story about our own history?
And that brings us to the first huge idea from our sources, the possibility that history itself has been rewritten. The argument here is that this calendar shift wasn't just a minor tweak. No, it was a cover for something way bigger: the deliberate manipulation of our entire timeline. And this isn't just one person's wild idea. For centuries, thinkers have challenged the official timeline. More recently, you have researchers like Heribert Illig, who proposed that several centuries of the early Middle Ages were just fabricated. And then there's Anatoly Fomenko, who argues that events we think happened in ancient times actually happened much, much later.
Okay, so if history was rewritten, where did it all go wrong? Well, according to the sources we're digging into, it all goes back to one single critical event, the Council of Nicaea, all the way back in 325 AD. This, they claim, is the moment everything changed, not just the timeline, but our core belief systems too.
So what was the big deal at Nicaea? It was a fundamental disagreement. On one side, you had the Unitarians, led by a Christian elder named Arius. Their belief was simple: God is absolutely one, indivisible. And Jesus, he was a revered human prophet, a messenger. But on the other side, you had the Trinitarians, led by Athanasius. They argued that Jesus was divine, the Son of God, part of a holy trinity. Two completely different views. So why did this religious debate get so heated? Well, according to these sources, you have to look at the politics. The Roman emperor at the time, Constantine, was a pagan who worshipped the sun, and he saw a golden opportunity. His empire was fractured, and he figured he could unify it by merging his own sun-worshipping beliefs with his new, fast-growing Christian faith. And to back up this argument, the sources point to some really striking parallels between Jesus and a Persian deity named Mithra, who was super popular with the Roman army. I mean, look at this. Both were called the Son of God, both were said to be born on December 25th, and both were believed to have been resurrected after 3 days. The similarities are pretty uncanny.
And to really hammer this point home, Constantine made Sunday the official Christian day of rest. Now, before this, early Christians observed the Sabbath on Saturday, following Jewish tradition. The clue is right there in the name: Sunday. It was the day historically dedicated to the pagan worship of the sun god, Sol Invictus.
Now, the sources paint a picture of Nicaea that's, well, it's not a calm, scholarly debate. It was a violent clash. The atmosphere was all about intimidation, and get this, it's even recorded that St. Nicholas, that St. Nicholas, the guy behind Santa Claus, got so angry that he walked up and slapped Arius right across the face.
And here's maybe the biggest bombshell the sources present. It's an alleged letter from Eusebius, who was one of Arius's key supporters. After the council, he supposedly wrote to Emperor Constantine and confessed, "We have committed a grave error, sire, when we accepted at your request an impious doctrine." I mean, wow, that's presented as a stunning admission of regret.
So, this brings us to our next chapter,
the secret beliefs of geniuses. Because the story, as our sources tell it, doesn't just stop at Nicaea. They argue that the original Unitarian belief didn't just vanish. Nope, it went underground, and it was secretly kept alive by some of the most brilliant minds in history.
And the prime example they give is Isaac Newton. When he died in 1727, he left this locked chest full of papers. For over 100 years, nobody touched it. Then, in 1872, some scholars at Cambridge University finally opened it, and they were so shocked by what they found, they ordered it sealed right back up. It wasn't until the papers were sold at an auction in 1936 and eventually digitized that the world finally learned about Newton's most closely guarded secret.
So what was this big secret? Well, it turns out Isaac Newton, the father of modern physics, was secretly an anti-Trinitarian. He believed the same thing Arius had preached centuries earlier. This quote, which is attributed to him, says it all. A cosmic system of such precision cannot be the work of three gods, but of one single perfect God.
Newton's hidden writings made it clear. He saw the Council of Nicaea as a great corruption of Christianity. He spent years trying to prove it, and he even wrote that he believed the original, true monotheistic faith had been preserved in the East by Muslims.
And according to these sources, Newton wasn't some lone wolf. Other intellectual giants apparently held very similar views. The famous writer Leo Tolstoy was actually excommunicated for his attacks on church doctrine. And Joseph Priestley, the scientist who discovered oxygen, was also a well-known Unitarian who openly rejected the Trinity.
So all of this, the changed calendars, the hidden beliefs, it all brings us to our final section, and it really boils down to one fundamental question, a question of trust. Can we really trust the version of history we've all been taught?
Let's just recap the narrative that's been woven through our sources today. You have a calendar that's suddenly and dramatically altered. You have a core religious belief that was allegedly decided by political power, not theological truth. And then for centuries, you have some of history's greatest minds secretly disagreeing with it all.
And that's where we're going to leave it. This explainer has laid out the arguments from these particular sources. It's not about claiming to have the final answer. Instead, it leaves us all with a really powerful and maybe a little unsettling question. If history can be changed, and if powerful ideas can be suppressed, how can any of us really know if the story we've been told is the truth?